Hi.
Hey.
Um, Welcome. I'm bleeding.
Oh, well, that's not a very good start.
It's not. I'm going to pause real quick because I'm seriously hangnail. Hang on. I'll be right back. Otherwise, it's just going to be blood everywhere. Hang on.
Chicken.
Okay. Sorry. Thanks, guys.
All right. No more
Um,
blood.
no more blood. I don't know why it has to, like, I don't know why hangnails bleed. Like, I just sliced the side of my finger off, but whatever. Anyway, hi. Happy Monday. It's clearly a Monday. Um,
Is it your middle finger too, for
it
real?
is. Yeah. Here's what I think of you, Monday. Um,
Right, basically.
anyway, guys, as you're listening to this, we are tromping around jolly old England. And so we hope that you're having a really wonderful Monday, but something tells me it's not as cool as ours. Sorry, not sorry. I'm super excited for this trip. So, um, we are also going to be going to France later on in the week. And so I picked this story. It's my turn. Oh, by the way, guys, welcome to our snack size episode. Yay. Where we bring you a weird true history story to get your week started off right and weird. And this one, Laura, I'm sure you've heard of it. I'm going to cover the dancing plague of 1518.
Yes, I have. I have heard of it.
Okay.
It's a good one though.
Yes, it is. And it did start in most of where I've read it started in France. So I was like, okay, let's do this one. So all of my information I got from the BBC.com. We are just all about Europe in these last couple of weeks. So, like all good plague stories, this one begins with omens. A star streaks across the sky, fields flood. Extreme cold is followed by extreme heat, which is followed inevitably by extreme hunger. On a sweltering summer's day in July of 1518, a woman called Frau Trophea steps into a square in Strasbourg and begins to dance. At first, those around her only watched, curiosity piqued by this unusual public display. They watch a woman who will not, cannot stop dancing. She dances for nearly a week, felled occasionally by exhaustion, but largely undaunted by the body's other warning signs: pain, hunger, shame. There's no music. Her heart keeps the tempo, working harder to make the motion continue. But by the time she's taken away, it's too late. Others have joined in. By August, there were hundreds of people dancing with her. What the fuck?
So fucking crazy. This story is just bananas.
It's bananas. It is so bananas. Like her, they cannot explain themselves. They don't know why they're dancing. They dance as if compelled, feet bloodied, limbs twitching. That's some serious dancing. When you just keep dancing, your feet are bleeding. It sounds awful. We've all had one too many long nights at the club, dancing far too long. So, chronicles outline the measures taken by the authorities in response to this. One writer describes dancers being carted off to St. Vidius's shrine outside the city, where they are given small crosses and red shoes. Another mentions more direct arrangements made for the dancers to tire themselves into submission, with, quote, persons specifically appointed to dance with them for payment to the music of drums and pipes. But this doesn't help. All of this was to no avail, and many danced themselves to death. Weird. So, in the 400 years or so since this bizarre event, Strasbourg's so-called dance plague, since it occurred, many theories have been proffered to explain what exactly happened, right? It's an event that grips us to this day. Obviously, we're talking about it on this podcast. It invites retellings and it inspires artists and creatives to put their own spin on these strange happenings. So, though it's now the most famous example, Strasbourg was not the only dancing plague to hit Europe during the medieval and early modern era. Many instances of uncontrolled or threatening dancing were recorded in Germany, like I said, in France, and other parts of the Holy Roman Empire. In earlier centuries, excuse me, these events were interpreted as divine punishment or demonic possession, of course. I mean, you've heard of those dancing demons, right? That come in and possess you and just make you cut a rug.
I mean, I've seen some people who look like they're possessed by demons up at the club, but
1,000%. So
we're looking at you, Miami.
Bienvenido a Miami. So they were remedied with religious, were hoping to be remedied with religious solutions like processions, masses, or direct intervention from priests. 2 decades before the summer of 1518, a cleric in Strasbourg named Sebastian Brandt wrote in his satirical allegory, The Ship of Fools, quote, that dance and sin are one in kind, blaming Satan for all this, quote, giddy dancing gaily done. So, Satan is the inventor of dance.
Footloose came to be
1,000%. And that's the end of the story. And then we have Footloose.
And then Kevin Bacon, as he does, saved all.
Yes, exactly. So several years after the incident in Strasbourg, the physician Paracelsus embarked on a series of treatises on choreomania. What?
Is that what it's called? Choreomania? I'm sorry, the names were very funny. Yes, go on.
Right.
Choreomania?
Choreo, like choreograph. Choreomania.
All right.
Including the diseases that deprive man of his reason, such as Saint Vitus's dance, falling sickness, melancholy, and insanity, and their correct treatment. So Paracelsus, who is now best known for his pioneering work on chemistry in medicine, argued that this phenomenon was probably more earthly than divine. He suggested that a person's laughing veins could provoke a ticklish feeling that rose from their limbs to their head, clouding judgment and provoking extreme motion until the frenzied blood was calmed. I was like, that seems like such a stretch, even back then.
Well, I mean, they used to take out people's blood because they thought it was, with leeches. So.
Leeches, right. Yeah, bloodletting, the whole thing. So this wasn't to absent sin entirely. Those most commonly afflicted by the dance, this guy wrote, included whores and scoundrels who take pleasure in guitar and lute playing, satisfying all voluptuousness, bodily pleasure, imagination, and fancy. So essentially, we should all be dancing according to this guy.
I'm also all our friends. All right, go on. Damn it.
Right. So his elaborations on possible causes were less archaic. He argued that imagination was a more plausible culprit than God or the devil. The imagination, Paracelsus said, doth not fly out of one house into another, but also most swiftly passeth, wow, but also most swiftly passeth from one city and country into another, so that by the imagination only of one person, the pestilence may come into some whole city or country. Sure. I mean, it checks out to me.
I mean, things be passeth.
Pathest, whatever the word is. I wrote that and I was like, I'm never going to be able to say that. But all right, I'll try. Yeah.
Hey, I know it passeth.
Passeth. So this interpretation aligns more closely with the current theories about mass psychogenic illness, which we have covered on this. We did briefly talk about this because I did cover mass hysteria cases. So it aligns more closely with current theories about mass psychogenic illness induced by febrile political and social circumstances. For a while, there were speculations about whether ergot, which is a mold found in rye stalks, could bring about powerful hallucinations and convulsions. Perhaps that might be responsible, but these have been largely dismissed. So there's a guy, an author by the name of John Waller, who wrote the most popular nonfiction book on the subject called A Time to Dance, A Time to Die, The Extraordinary Story of the Dancing Plague of 1518. He instead characterizes choromania as a psychic epidemic akin to others around the world involving other involuntary bodily responses such as laughing or fainting. So, you know how like sometimes laughter is contagious? Like somebody gets really going on a giggle fit and you join in, and then before you know it, like you're laughing, they're laughing, your friends are all laughing. It's just one of those like laughter is contagious kind of things.
Absolutely, yeah.
It sounds like that's what they are trying to explain this dancing plague with.
Well, and I remember in the episode that we talked about this, we also talked about like some other random ass stuff that happened, like nuns that were meowing.
Oh, the
like
meowing nuns, yes.
And
right.
I mean, this has happened a lot of times in very strange circumstances.
Right?
Things, I mean, not necessarily this, but human behavior that is very odd, and it's like you said, like one person starts and then everybody catches on.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, like Folie à Deux, but just gone crazy.
But en masse, yeah.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the story of a surreal summer in Strasbourg is just that, a story. Mass dancing of some form is documented in at least 6 different contemporaneous chronicles, as dancers' motions reportedly continuing for weeks. Now, Frau Trophäa is named as the instigator in several of them. Beyond that, though, the details start to diverge. So, various starting dates are given, different methods for dealing with the phenomenon are emphasized. So, like plenty of other historical events, even a portrait is drawn from fragments, right? So, regardless of the actual facts, the tale continues to grip our imagination. A lone figure who sparks a mass movement, a dance that is so captivating, so consuming, that it transcends individual will and physical limitation, sometimes with deadly consequences. That sounds cool. So, you know what I mean? Like, it just sounds so intriguing.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
For sure.
So it is definitely the kind of event that ensnares even those of us who continue to write about it and talk about it today. So our prose is filled with conjured details about the damage done to weary toes or the tick and pump of Frau Trophäa's heart. So uncontrollable dance has a bewitching effect on those who contemplate it. One only has to think of the popular Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, The Red Shoes, with its cursed scarlet leather slippers that condemn their owner into a dance so torturous that she eventually finds an executioner to hack off her own feet. It's a horrible tale, and people love it. Although its moral implications are relatively straightforward, a good old dose of punishment for vanity, the shoes wearer put through this ordeal because she dared to covet such beautiful footwear in the first place. Its darker suggestions of possession and incessant movement have inspired numerous works, including a Powell and Pressburger film, a Kate Bush album, and several ballets.
That's awesome.
Right. There's even a Supernatural episode about cursed objects. Yes, about cursed objects, and a pair of ballet slippers is one of them. And in it, the ballet dancer puts the shoes on and she dances, and she starts dancing faster and faster and faster and faster and faster until eventually I think her feet break off. Like, she dances so fast in these ballet slippers, her feet break off and she dies from the blood loss.
That's fucking intense. All right.
Hella crazy. Yeah. So It was perhaps inevitable that the dancing plague regained popularity now. The last 2 years have yielded feverish interest in the many pandemics that have gone before us, from the Black Death to the Spanish flu. We have looked to them not only for comparison, but also seemingly to reassure ourselves that all epidemics eventually end. Within that, something tenuously classed as a plague, where the contagion isn't sickness but movement, is always going to be alluring. And I have to agree with that. It is an...
It's the
right?
weirdest fucking thing.
Exactly. It is an infectious preoccupation. In July 2020, Jonathan Glazer debuted a 10-minute film titled Strasbourg 1518, featuring solo performers dancing until they dropped. This year, with the theatre back in full swing, productions including The Maladies at London's Almeida Theatre, Dance to the Bone at Cardiff's Sherman Theatre, and Met in Ingvarsten's The Dancing Public, which is currently on tour across Europe, have all alluded to the events in Strasbourg, using them to frame meditations on oppression, disconnection, and mass movement. Now, events of mass disorder have always captivated artists. There's something fundamentally fascinating in a moment where social fabric breaks. Conventions are replaced with much weirder and more inexplicable happenings. In the case of choreomania, what emerges is not only a sense of entrancement or self-destruction, but physical protest. Currently, the idea of a dance plague registers not only as an oddity, but something more liberatory. As scary as an unstoppable dance might be, there is, again, an allure to it. What might happen if we allowed ourselves to be properly carried away? What could be achieved with that feeling if it was replicated in the bodies of hundreds of other people also moving around us? So this, however, wasn't always the case. There's an author by the name of Gottman, and she wrote a book, Once Upon a Time, A Dancing Plague, however it was conceived. She explores was something to be viewed with suspicion, right? In her research on 19th century approaches to choreomania, she discovered an alarmed attitude wrapped up in a colonial thought and fear of otherness. So there was a real articulation, she says, there was a real articulation of a version of modernity. Thank you. You just have to spit and then you'll get the words out properly, I've learned. As being in contrast to what was understood as more feminine, more animal, more wild and untamed. And this is what she's talking about, the medical and historical writings that she discovered in the Victorian era. There was a racist and highly gendered discourse that was taking shape. At that point, when contextualizing the new perceived instances of choreomania, the medieval period was a convenient frame for understanding it. She says the medieval, compared to the African, largely as this kind of backward, non-European, pre-modern period, the very concept of dance mania was a useful political tool, allowing cross-comparison with and dismissal of protests and practices involving any element of physical movement. She gives the example of the puppet ruler King Radama II, who took control of Madagascar in 1861. When his people showed their displeasure, exercising their right to protest against these kingdoms that sold off their lands to the Europeans, with the king eventually being deposed, it was easier for colonial missionaries to dismiss these actions as just another example of choreomania, transmuting a political protest into a mere instance of madness.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But it makes a lot of sense, right?
It does, right? Write it off as just mass hysteria. Mm-hmm. So now the prevailing mood has shifted. It is precisely the femininity and otherness of a dancing plague that makes it interesting. For today's artists or thinkers, it is both historic curio and symbol. At the center is a simple idea. A group of people start to dance and can't stop. But why they dance and to what ends remains an open-ended question, one that can be asked again and again with different answers depending on what is being sought. Madness, hunger, protest, freedom, pleasure, ecstasy. In the imagination, however, the dancers' feet remain forever in motion, moving to their own inscrutable rhythm. And that is the dancing plague of 1518. Pretty cool,
Nice.
huh?
That is
Yeah.
pretty cool. You know what it also reminds me of? Remember the silent discos?
Yeah.
Like where you just see everybody with their headphones on, but like if you're not paying attention, it just looks like a bunch of fucking people
Right? Being
like all
weird.
doing their own thing. Kind of,
Yeah.
it's like that's what when we talk about it. That's always kind of what I envision. You know what I mean? Like a
Yeah.
silent disco with the
Right?
fucking people just going crazy.
For sure.
Pretty
Yeah.
funny though, yeah.
Pretty
People
crazy,
dancing
right?
for hours on end, and you can't hear a fucking thing. And
You
you're like,
can't hear a
what's
fucking
going
thing.
on?
Exactly. And that's kind of how this was. There was no music, there was no nothing. There were no headphones in 1518, so it was just sort of like a very early silent disco.
You're gonna look at those different now, I bet.
I mean, 1,000%. I mean, and quite honestly, you should be alarmed if I start just dancing in the street while we're in London and or Paris. Or,
Absolutely.
right? And start like cutting a rug down the aisle, down the like the hallways of the British Museum and the Louvre. You're gonna like take the kids and be like, yeah, we don't know her. Or go off this way, guys.
I mean,
look, I have been known to dance in grocery stores to the music.
I love to dance to like humiliate / embarrass the kids. Yeah.
Good, great. This is gonna be the best trip ever then. Anyway, guys, let us know what you think. What do you think caused the dancing plague? Is it a situation where it's like laughter is contagious, so dancing is contagious? I mean, I've never been plagued by that. I mean, so there have been a number of times I've gone to the club and didn't dance at all because I just wasn't feeling it. But, and I love to dance. I have the best time, but I don't know. It's a weird one. So
I'm not a big dancer.
I had to share, get a little bit more in depth in it, even though we did talk about it when I discussed mass hysteria cases. So anyway.
Yeah, but interesting. Thank you.
That's it, guys. Thank you so much. We hope you have a wonderful week. Have the week you'll have. And Laura's back next week with her weird story, weird history. And then we'll be back in a regularly scheduled programming here at home, bringing you fresh, new content. But to that end, stay safe out there because you never know who
or what
is going to start dancing inexplicably around you.
Fair.
Bye, guys.